to you by the descendants of Robert and Elizabeth Smalls Vennings. By now you all know that we are the descendants of slaves.
Okay, we gotta have some quiet. Let's have some quiet now. Let's relax. It's just water.
By now you all know that we are the descendants of slaves. How many of you did not know that? But listen now for the rest of the story. In Africa, we were hunted. We were hunted for what we knew how to do, for what we could do better than any other tribe along the coast of West Africa. Does anybody know what that was? We were hunted for our technology and for our skilled labor. In America, they called it Carolina gold. So at today's rate, Carolina gold was a multi-billion-dollar food crop called rice. A rice not quite long grain, hearty, and very versatile in what you could do with it. It was sold throughout the United States and in international markets. But only we knew as West Africans how to plant it, how to harvest it, how to process it. Maddie?
It was us who brought this mortar and pestle technology to the U.S. Used it to pound rice until the grains behaved. Us who brought grass weaving technology used to create fanners that separated the rice from its hull. Us who brought delta cultivation techniques, clearing of swamps of trees, designing the canals and ditches and banks and floodgates to control the tides, building dikes to protect the gold from salt water during high tides. At the port of Charleston, it was our foremothers and forefathers who brought the highest prices. And so, it was us that they hunted and kidnapped and enslaved and brought to the port of Charleston, sold off to fledgling rice plantations in Mount Pleasant, where we stand today.
Who's up next?
When we arrived at Port Charleston, we did not speak English. We didn't even speak Gullah. We spoke the language of our tribes. And when these colonists, these kidnappers, discovered that we were communicating with one another, they would sell us off in pieces. A father to this plantation, a mother to another, disrupting the family unit, disrupting any sense of community.
I think you have to put it up.
But we were resilient. We took what we learned in English and what we remembered from Africa and created Sea Island Creole, or what is now referred to as the Gola language. The word Gola is said to be a variant of the name Angola, an African country, a language that only we understood that allowed us to speak freely, an encoded language, a secret language that we could use even in the presence of our kidnappers. Some of our words have made their way into the English language. Our word goober, referring to peanut in English. Our word gumbo, referring to okra in English. Our word tote, to carry in English. Yam, the sweet potato in English. And baba, meaning brother in English. Even kumbaya, come by here, my lord, come by here, was originally a Gola shout song, a word color that we used to coat.
So how did we become free? After centuries of enriching these colonists with our technology and our skilled labor. How did we capture freedom? It was because of the Civil War, it wasn't because of the Civil War or the Emancipation Proclamation. Some of our ancestors were free well before then. Yes, a few escaped and fled to the north. Others were set free because of specialized skill that the owner could profit from, or as a humane gesture at the end of an old slave's life. But
Just talk up.
But most of our ancestors, those free before slavery was abolished, you see, were freed, manumitted because of miscegenation. You see, it wasn't because enough for us to till their soil for profit. These enslavers also fathered children with their slaves, and later freed them upon usually upon their death, and our family was no different.
Let's meet Samuel Vennings Sr., a white English settler. In 1760, he moved from England to Savannah, Georgia with a wife and 3 children. 3 years later, he, his wife, and daughter were killed during a massacre by Native Americans. His remaining children, 2 teenage sons, Nicholas and Samuel Vennings Jr., avoided death by hiding in a hog shed, and later made their way to Charleston, South Carolina, where, as orphans, they were taken in by Vanderhorst's family of Christchurch Parish. Like most colonists of the day, Samuel Vennings Jr. grew up and inherited his father's land. But Samuel Vennings Jr. also fathered children with his slaves, our foremothers. How do we know? Because in 1818, he left a will. In it, he directed his children to manumit and set free Sue and her children. In it, he directed his children, or forfeit the estate he left to them. His also provided a fund for the support of Sue and her children during her old age and their minority. So even before any war proclamation, our foremothers and their children were oftentimes set free because she bore the slaves' owners' children, and the mulatto children were his own. And so this was the tradition of Samuel Vennings Jr. and his lineage. His son, Robert Murrow Vennings, owned slaves who bore his children, and so did his sons. William Crawford Vennings, my 3rd great-grandfather.
Let me have that.
I get the last piece. William Crawford Vennings was born almost 200 years ago in 1825. He lived right here in Mount Pleasant on his family's plantation at Remley's Point. Do you guys know where Remley's Point is?
Oh, yeah.
It's right here, right? By the bridge. He was a church deacon. He was a lieutenant in the Confederate Army, and he owned slaves. He married Sarah Dorrell Wilden, a white woman, and together they had 8 children. But William Crawford Vennings, like his father and grandfather, also bore children with his slaves. One of those children was Robert Vennings, born in 1850 in one of 6 slave cabins on that very same plantation, and he is the only that was listed as mulatto and free. This Robert Vennings, this mulatto, is my 2nd great-grandfather, and this, dear cousins, is the great divide in the Vennings family. Before Robert Vennings, everyone is white. After Robert Vennings in 1850, we are all Negro. And that's why on your shirt it says 1850, because that is the first record we have of us as Black Vennings. Robert Mulatto had a son named Edward Vennings, listed as Negro, who had a son named Robert Vennings, listed as Negro, who is my grandfather. All descendants of William Crawford Vennings, the white deacon and Confederate war lieutenant. In the heritage databases, William and Sarah Vennings are listed as having 8 children, with no mention of his mulatto or Black issue. But we know today, standing here, that we too are his grandchildren. We know that we come from a line of white English colonists named Vennings. But we also come from a line of technologically advanced, highly skilled, resilient West Africans. We know that it was our technology and our skilled labor that enriched the Vennings family and this little country. So, stand tall, dear Vennings, for we are standing today at the root, free. The end.